Hello, Mel Berry, David Van Daff, welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm really excited about what you guys are doing, have done, and what your experience and is. So we're going to go straight into it. Mel, can you go first? Because I've only started to realize all this good stuff that you have been doing and your colleagues, and I'm really excited to learn more. So tell us about your journey, where you started, what brings you today, and tell us a little bit about Hurstford so we can dive into that a bit deeper in the conversation.
Yeah, and thanks, Grace, for having me. It's a pleasure to join you and David. And look, my background, I came from the water world, where as a swimmer, I migrated to the land and through that into the fitness industry and enjoyed it for what it gave me. It gave me, I guess, a better understanding of working. So having come from an athletic kind of background, that was really important. And I fell into, and I definitely fell into it, working for brands. And for me, that was really exciting because they were the shiny things that as a swimmer, I wanted to be able to be part of. And I was an expat kid, so I was born in India. So I migrated in my early 20s to the Middle East and lived in Dubai. And it was at that time that I guess, created an opportunity by myself to work with a distributor in the Middle East for Reebok, and that was great to be able to be part of that. But my true love and passion is swimming. And when I had the opportunity, because my boss that was the distributor for Reebok then set up Speedo, so I, joined him and the team there. And it was a great opportunity to be able to understand, I guess, the nuances and everything that sat behind sports marketing, because I guess I'd sat through the other lens, and it was great to cut my teeth in a business that was probably quite safe, because as a distributor, you don't really get exposed to, the big opportunities. And it was brilliant. And through that, my business career went to working with Speedo International. And for 4 years, I loved it. I had swimming to start with, and then was mortified when swimming got taken away from me. And I was given the sports of beach volleyball and triathlon. And through them, I traveled the globe and thoroughly enjoyed that. So they were the kind of, I guess, the early decade. And that was a wonderful place to enjoy 2 Olympic Games. So my first being Atlanta. That definitely was a kind
Oh,
of an eye
wow.
opener. I remember watching the wonderful Irish swimmer Michelle Smith win
Yeah,
her kind of medal before obviously things kind of changed for her.
yeah.
And then Sydney Olympics, which was a very, very special Olympics to be part of, and something that will definitely be part of kind of my memory for life. And watching friends, beach volleyball players, win Olympic gold medals, and you being thanked as kind of part of that, you don't get much more special than that. So that's why sport in those kind of early years was something that was so powerful, and there's so many kind of memories that sit behind it.
So you were eagerly watching Paris, I imagine, this summer and all of the good stuff happening.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, because you asked that connecting the dots, and it's obviously a wonderful Steve Jobs analogy, isn't it? How do you connect the dots? We're kind of looking kind of backwards. And for me, the elite sport world was great. But as I transitioned out of working in the corporate world to set up my own consultancy, I understood very quickly, and it was quite a hard fall, that people enjoyed you with the budget that you had or the opportunities that you had. And when those opportunities weren't there anymore, and I was delivering a consultancy piece of work for Speedo, and that was delivering their international sports marketing contract with the FIBV, which is obviously the International Federation. The phone didn't ring as much,
Right.
the emails didn't ping as much. But it was great because it gave me the opportunity to start my entrepreneurial journey, and that was being able to own that. And I think the transition from elite sport into cause-related marketing really made me understand the lessons that I had learned, and there were many, and I know we'll go on to talk about that probably a lot more over the course of this podcast, is cause related marketing. I can make a real difference to people's lives, and that's quite special. It's nice to help somebody win an Olympic gold medal, but when you change somebody's trajectory in life, and or you potentially save their life,
Yeah.
that's quite special. And that will always be my purpose, my cause, the wonderful Simon Sinek why. And that's one of so many reasons that went down a road to founding Her Spirit with my co-founder, Holly Woodford.
I love it. We're going to come back to her spirit in a minute, but there's a lot in that. And obviously, sport is a huge connect the dots here, David. You're obviously from that world as well. Connect the dots for us from your side.
Absolutely. David Van Daff. I am the Vice President of Industry Development and Public Affairs for the National Academy of Sports Medicine. My background began in sport, and I was just doing the math in my head in terms of, gosh, how long ago was that? And unfortunately, it's 28 coming up on 29 years. Before I know it, I'll be talking about 3 decades within the fitness industry, which is equally something to be proud of, but also a recognition of the fact
Where did
of
the
I'm no
time
spring
go,
chicken.
hey?
How I ended up in the fitness industry was, somewhat of an evolution from the sport industry. I had worked in collegiate sports through my undergraduate degree as well as my master's degree, University of Kansas, University of Tennessee, in both basketball and football. Paid for my education, gave me tremendous experience, gave me a pathway to pursue a career in sport based on tremendous experience and a master's degree in sport administration, et cetera, et cetera. I made a decision to leave collegiate sports after my master's degree was over and the football season had concluded. Was in the midst of interviewing with a variety of NFL teams. A mentor of mine, who was a very high-ranking member of the sports industry, had reached out to me and had suggested I go out prior to going in entry level into an NFL position that I was interviewing for, to go out and actually get the best title I could find and then reapply a year later. Felt like that was a strategy that would help me get on the pathway that I wanted to go to, as opposed to going right from school. At
Like,
that time, Bally Total Fitness was booming in Chicago. I had come back to Chicago. They had recruited me to run a gym, and there was a general manager title, which coming out of graduate school seemed like a wonderful title. So I pursued it with an understanding of I would learn the ropes of the fitness industry and then progressively reapply for the positions that I was seeking in sport. 6 months in on the position, had gotten promoted, found that I really enjoyed the industry. There were a variety of elements that I liked about it. In addition, coming from sport where I was used to working 80 hours and 7 days a week, and all of a sudden had a bit of a social life and had been able to make some money, and found it to be an industry that was only going to grow exponentially. So I spent 14 years at Bally Total Fitness, and really going from
oh,
running a gym to running the Chicago area to ultimately going up to the corporate office and overseeing personal training and fitness operations and learning and education, and throughout a very good career within Bally. Um, Over that period of time, though, I was an enormous customer of the National Academy of Sports Medicine. We had fitness professionals that were under my wing, and we would start the year with 5,000, end the year with 5,000, and hire 10,000 in between.
wow.
So progressively, what I found over time was that my best employees were coming out with NASM certifications. So I developed a very close relationship with them to how to find more of them, how to utilize that education with existing staff. It ultimately led to my inquiring, as I love this organization more and more and really love the leadership, of what would opportunities look like if I were to take a step outside of Bally. Left in 2010, worked there from 2010 to 2015, oversaw business development, the health club channel, a host of other things. Then left for 5 years, was a part of a technology startup that was primarily in sports. So finally coming back
Back
into
into
sport with a
sport.
group of people I had worked closely with. And then after 5 years and doing the startup and growing a business, NASM was growing by leaps and bounds. I had very close ties into their leadership. They had an opportunity for me to come back that I just could not pass up, and I've never looked back since. So from 2020 to 24, I've overseen industry relations, public affairs, health club channel. We have a business called Club Connect that I oversee, a whole host of other things. But I'm back to my roots at NASM now, and it's been wonderful.
The power of sport, hey? I mean, I think the beauty for me as well is like as we've all been sporty younger, when you can stick in the industry that allows you to work as well as stay active and enjoy the sport and the culture, it's brilliant. And it is no surprise that 94% of leaders, or at least female leaders, associate themselves as being an athlete in some shape or form. And
It,
it shows the skills you learn.
It
Trans
is interesting. It's a valid point. And like you said, the skills that you learn translate very well to our industry,
yeah.
both for the work and the effort. And I think also understanding the psychology of the member, the consumer,
Mhm.
coming from an athletic background, knowing what it's like to push yourself and to strive for results, I think really helps and correlates well.
Yeah, and I think we can all recognize those skills, right? In every athlete, especially someone who's done really well and stayed with a sport. The discipline, the communication, the ability to fail, get up and start again, the resilience, the opportunity, the kind of relationship building, and the ability to work with people across disciplines. We could go on and on and on. I think we're all on the same journey here. That it's
Agreed.
powerful, powerful tool and experience.
Yeah, 100%. And I
Agreed.
think that resilience piece is one that is so greatly needed. And I think as an athlete that, what I learned is be prepared to try,
Mm.
because I think as a society and people, and whether or not that's leaders or, on the journey, trying is something that people don't want to, because what happens if I fail? And I think it's that framing of that narrative that failing is a success because you're learning and you're going through and you're understanding how can you be better, but underpinning that is the necessity to be resilient, to then be able to pick yourself up and get going again. And I think as athletic people or people on a business journey is the necessity for focus, and whether or not that's singular minded focus, but not to the detriment of the culture that you create. And I know, Grace, we spoke about the wonderful Dr. Brené Brown, didn't we, about being truly vulnerable.
Love
Until
her.
you are truly vulnerable, will you be your best self? And I think it's a really important trait to have.
Yeah.
Well put.
Mel, you've traveled the world and you were in Dubai, but it sounds when it wasn't even cool to be in Dubai. So,
Yep.
not telling your age or anything. But you're in the UK now. Explain to me now what yourself and Holly have created, and give me some of the stats around it as well, because I know some of the stats are powerful.
They are, and yes. So myself and my co-founder Holly, we founded Her Spirit, and the reason that we did so is because we became, I guess, two women in the industry that had worked a lot in women's sport and activity, and became increasingly frustrated. We always talk about, we went to a conference and we were the two grumpy women at the back going, I wouldn't do it that way. We should do it. And don't we see so many of those? And that's obviously kind of both genders, but we both have the desire to not be negative and say, right, I'm going to help to solve that problem.
Right.
And both of us said, right, we're going to put our money and our reputations where our mouth is, and we're going to form a business. And the essence of Her Spirit from day one is a beautiful quote by an American activist, Maya Angelou. And Maya Angelou talks in her quote about a woman flowing freely to find her spirit and only her spirit. So if you talk in behavior change language, it's about intrinsic motivation of wanting to be your best self and be active. And if you bring that forward now, is what are some of the problems that we're trying to solve? And these are UK stats, and I think they're probably representative, and David, kind of value your opinion from a US point of view, that there are 1 million women less active than men in the UK. So that's the stark statistic. People talk about 5%, but people go, well, 5%, is that good? Is that bad? Well, what's that
What is it?
mean? That means 1 million women less. If you look at strength, of which I'm hugely passionate about because it's been part of my life, and more recently having had a total hip replacement, the necessity to prepare myself, I call it, for kind of battle, and to come out fighting. Strength training has been a necessity, and it is, I think, your stat, you talk about for all women, categorically it is for all women, but 1 in 2 women over the age of 50 will break a bone due to osteoporosis because they're not strong enough. And that's, again, one of the problems that, we're trying to solve. And for us, we need to be able to provide a digital solution. We live in a digital world. and Her Spirit connects women, whether or not that's in their location or their activity level, but the necessity to understand what does good look like, because I think we live in a world which is very cloudy, cluttered, confusing, because you go, well, what does being fit mean? So if
Yeah.
you choose the chief medical officers, and I know it's the same from the World Health Organization, it's 150 minutes of heart-raising activities and 2 strength sessions a week. We want to change the world. We want to change the world for women. And, our vision is a world where every woman feels safe, connected, and empowered to be kind of active, because it's about that woman taking that opportunity to to change. We basically we want to change the world. Are you in? Are you coming on the Her Spirit bus? Because we'd love to have you.
What's nice about this is it is about bringing it together. It's working together, bringing it together, and ultimately adding women together. So let me make sure I'm clear as well. It's really about how do we help people, more women, more people to get more active in community and adding that safety factor because we're doing it together. So
100%.
taking away some of that safety barrier, and it's an unfortunate aspect that we continue to be very, very cognizant of. And I don't run at nighttime, and I do like to run, but I don't run at nighttime for that reason. And it is a challenge, but well done, Mel. I think this is a global problem, obviously in a global area. So there's opportunity. Is Her Spirit going global or?
Yeah, so we do have customers across the globe, US, Australia, obviously the English-speaking countries. It's a problem that is a global problem. For us as a business, we needed to understand how we do the UK, and we do it well to then be able to scale and build from. Tech is that solution. So again, if you want to know more, go to herspirit.co.uk, and that's the problem, the global problems that we're trying to solve. And through the technology that we have built and own, it enables all of that to happen. So we created an algorithm where we know that women are competitive, but they're ordinarily competitive with self instead of competitive with others. So if you look at, I guess, a product that has comparables in Strava, that we believe is built very much for the male persona, because it's about being the first or the fastest. What we're trying to educate women is leveling up. So the more activity you do, the more challenges that you join, the more posts. So we talk about you can't be fit and selfish. You need to be fit and community minded. But digital is an enabler. It's not the solution. And the connecting piece is powerful because our relationship has obviously been founded in that. But when you meet, that's so powerful because that play of digital and physical together, we believe, I guess what we're trying to understand is long-term adherence to physical activity and how you use digital as that enabler to change, those stats that are quite, stark and unfortunately not going in the right way, going the wrong way.
Yeah. And if we can get that million people more active in the community, it ultimately leads into needing more trainers, more gyms, more spaces, more activities, and more challenges. And David, what Mel is referring to is the strength training. Since I turned 40, my algorithm changed, and I have got strength training from menopause just being thrown at me. I'm like, what? Just
Yes.
like overnight. But
It's
it's true. We should all be strength training. And that's part of what, like, obviously, NASM is expanding globally and particularly globally, obviously, as well. And it's going to be a higher demand, hopefully, for you guys.
it is, and let me take a step back because I really do love this topic, and it's something I talk about pretty frequently. Let me go back to 1996, as I referenced before. The gyms that I was associated with, roughly 450 gyms across the country for Bally Total Fitness. There were a couple of things that were quite interesting in the early stages of my career, which is we still had gyms in some areas that would be smaller gyms where it would be it would be a men's gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It would be a women's gym Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. It
Hey.
seems amazing and I do feel incredibly old to think that actually was a part of the structure, and it was a fairly common structure. And the thought process was back then was that women did not want to train and exercise with men, and potentially vice versa. So you had gyms that were set up in that particular way. Not a lot of them. There were more in the 80s, but going into the 90s, they still existed. Now, let me fast forward a bit. As Bally was growing rapidly, we were acquiring chains and building new gyms, et cetera. The format, I was actively involved in equipment purchases and then also in the design and layout of gyms. So the thought process was back then was that you would put all of your treadmills and your ellipticals and your bikes right front and center, right in front of the windows. So as people were coming into the gyms, they would see all of the activity. But then what you would do is take your strength training areas. And what we did was we had this brushed steel and we would make it into somewhat of a cage to where if you wanted to lift with heavy weights or needed a bench or a squat rack, you would need to enter into this caged off area. And the thought process was that this area was considered so intimidating for females, but also for some men as well. We needed to push this away from the rest of the fray and almost look at it as an independent gym.
Yeah.
This is the way these gyms were set up. Now, what I see when I go into any gym, it doesn't matter high value, low price, luxury, urban area, suburban, whatever it may be. You go into a gym now and you go into the quote unquote free weight area, and it is always a 50-50 male and female, or it may skew even more female. This evolution in terms of strength training that I've seen in the US has been monumental from where I started to where I'm at now. So that's an observation when I talk about kind of the drastic changes of mentality and action within the health clubs. This is probably the number one thing that I've seen. The other element that I will bring up, and I've encouraged people to do this, a lot of times when you go into a health club environment, like I go early in the mornings, so I see the same types of people in there. And so it's easy for me to form opinions on the 5 a.m., 6 a.m. crew, but I'm not there the rest of the day. It's interesting when you talk to people, what does the afternoon crew look like? What does the evening crew look like, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some consistencies that we see in the US. And what I have found over time, and I learned this probably 10, 15 years ago. I remember there were instructors at my gym that were teaching classes back then, and I had been talked to. I was taking a spinning class early in the mornings, and that evolved into, oh, you should take my TRX class. Oh, you should do my high intensity class, that type of thing. So I started taking some classes that I'd never really done before. A lot of people that are kind of disciplined in the space. I don't need a class, I've got my whole routine. You start doing the classes, and really what I found over time is that the intensity was so much higher than what I expected. I took a class that was a 6 a.m. class 2 days a week that was as difficult as anything that I had ever been through in sport or in training at all. It was burpees and it was push-ups and it was mountain climbers and it was just constant. And most mornings, I was the only male in there. But from a female perspective, the range skewed from young 20s to mid 60s.
Right.
And every one of them worked hard. And it was at that moment that I started recognizing the fact of, I think females as a general whole are working harder than men in a typical health club environment. Just the intensity that they're putting forth. And this is from a US perspective. And so it's always stuck out in my head over time when I'm in a gym, running on a treadmill, I'm lifting, maybe I'm doing a class, that type of thing, to kind of get a gauge on who are my regulars, who am I seeing consistently, and also who are the folks that are really pushing themselves in this environment. Not just strolling around, kind of taking it easy, but really training hard. And that has skewed far more female in my experience and progressively getting larger and larger as the years go on.
And it's just worth recognizing that it's different, right? To your point, not only do we join classes more because partly because that participation and obviously the timing and scheduling and so on, you got to address, I think, different populations group that a little bit differently. And if any operator or club or sport club is out there not doing that, they're just missing some of the beat, right? You're missing not knowing
True.
some of the customer, I suppose, and the customer experience, or to tap into the best way of delivering your service to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
David, one of your things over the years, now as we've talked about as well as part of NASM, you've had some amazing female leaders in the business, and to give me a snapshot into some of your experience in this as well, because it's not the experience of in vast majority of the industry, in particular of fitness, but also many parts of industry, of other industries. So give us your experience across your career.
I will. I'm going to start with this. When I took over the Chicago area for Bally pretty early on in my career, I had 31 gyms, I think it was. And I remember being tasked probably 6 months in to put all of my managers, my club managers, in a ranking system. And the purpose behind the ranking system was we were growing at such a rapid rate that they were looking for talent and how talent could be developed to take on further responsibilities. And I remember I believe it was of the 31 clubs that I had, I believe I had 10 female managers. And so I went about and I worked closely with all these folks. And I remember going through and ranking them all. And I took a step back afterwards and I looked at who my top 10 were. I was asked to submit in my top 10. And of my top 10, it was like 6 of the top 10 were female leaders. And so I recognized the fact of, oh my gosh. And really, if I did a top 12, all 7 of them would be in there. And I thought, this is really interesting. And let me take a deeper dive into this. And what am I finding of these? What are these female managers as a core doing that makes me elevate them into that role in terms of how they're performing in their duties? So that was my first experience where I thought, this is really interesting. And this could skew me from a hiring perspective, knowing that, hey, as I'm hiring in managers, knowing that, as a general whole, my female leaders, they're far more detail oriented, they're more organized, they're more dependable, their sales are better. All of these different components were showing up as a general whole. So that was my experience. The other benefit that I had is that I've had some tremendous female leaders. Mind you, I came from a background of sport, working in basketball and football. The two my two employers in both basketball and football are Hall of Fame coaches, and tremendous leaders and well respected throughout.
Yeah.
But I didn't have much female leadership or really camaraderie at that point in terms of very male dominated environments. So coming in and working in fitness, I was exposed to some absolutely fantastic leaders, and I could spend a lot of time talking about it. I'm going to drop a couple of names here to start off with, but Tia Willows had been my employer, my leader, my mentor at Bally Total Fitness for many, many years. And I remember thinking to myself, I had worked for these tremendous coaches over time that are so well respected, world renowned, Hall of Fame coaches. And I remember thinking to myself, Tia Willows is as good a leader, if not a better leader, ultimately, than they are in, a far different environment, working in business compared to sport.
Yeah.
But all of the leadership qualities that you look for in terms of inspiring and dedicated and compassionate and all these different things that get the most out of people, she was just absolutely stellar. So very early on in my career, I was exposed to somebody who was just best in class. And one of the things when I think about her and I think of other female leaders that I think that they've done as well, if not better than other leaders that I've been accustomed to, they challenge you. And I believe as an inherent whole, everybody wants to be challenged, but they also work with a level of compassion. They lead with compassion and respect and empathy. They develop relationships. You want to work hard for them, but at the same time, you're challenged. And so there's this whole environment where you really feel, at least it's been my experience in working with female leaders, that you feel like you're giving your all, you're rewarded, you're respected, you're valued. There's a quote, and it's train people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough or engage with them so they don't have to or they don't want to ultimately, right? And I'm butchering that quote a bit. But it was my experience, not only with Tia, but then Lori McCartney, who was the president of NASM, had all of those same qualities as well. And then there have been a series of other folks that, both from a leadership and a just working alongside, had significant qualities that were so impactful to the business, but also inspirational and motivational. Jennifer Halsell DeWitt is one, just as good as they get. Jody Wellman, who I had worked closely with, who took a career working as an executive and then wrote a book and is now doing TED Talks and is on bestseller lists, and all of those, blending creativity and elite level leadership qualities and skills and business acumen. I've been blessed to work with tremendous leaders and fortunately had the opportunity of working with some absolutely phenomenal female ones.
Well, it's great to hear it sometimes, because I think, Mel, you're like myself. Sometimes we don't hear it and we hear more of the, like, as you mentioned at the start, we're self-critical a lot, right? You're the annoying, what was it, complaining woman in the back self-declared as well. So it is nice sometimes just to be reminded going, yeah, we have to challenge, and we do feel like we work well together collaboratively and so on. Mel, when you're working with, obviously four women with women, you're developing obviously the culture, in a very unique way, because how many men is in the business? And also, are you thinking about it from a male perspective at all, or what's your perception?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two interesting points in there that we always look through a lens of a woman, and it's picking up the point that you raised a few minutes ago around safety. And we did our barrier survey to truly understand what our community and our wider partners felt. And safety was the number one thing, and that safety around darkness. So we just recently launched our campaign Own the Night, because we're asking women to feedback and say, right, what are those problems? How do you own the night? So if you connect with others, and running with others is really important. But it's also picking up on, some of David's point, I guess, and I would counter argue that it's a lot of women don't feel safe in gym environments because they don't feel competent enough. They'll feel judged. They won't want to go in there. That's not a safe place for them to be. And I think your point in there around or kind of behaviors is a really, really critical one. But we cannot solve the problem that is a global and a UK one alone. We need the Davids of this world, and hence why he's now an honorary gentleman of her spirit. And our first two non-exec directors were gentlemen. There was a guy called Chris Brindley and Ian Philby, because we need to have different eyes, different views. Because I think if we have a very narrow view, then we won't be able to solve the problem. And that problem is 100% gender, that we need to then be able to do that. And we have to think, one of the things is, well, how do we understand? You have to walk the shop floor and actually what's happening for women and what's the understanding of them. But again, it's then being able to provide different solutions, being problem kind of solvers. And, I love the fact, David, that you talk about female leaders that empowered you, because it's quite ironic that the leaders that took me through the early part of my business career in the sports corporate world were all men. And there was never a time where I felt that they weren't anything but brilliant. And as I evolved as a woman, I think one of the people that I would quote, it's an amazing woman in Australia. Her name's Deirdre Anderson, and Dee is a brilliant person. And I remember for me, when she was helping me to develop to be more resilient and more understanding of self, I went, Dee, I want to move to Australia because that's what I want to do from my life point of view. And I expected her to get her black book out and go, well, of course, you can contact this, but you're my mentor. She said to me, so when you sit down, you sit on a chair, right? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what is this woman talking about? She's crazy. And she talked about stability. And I will always use that, I guess, as a female kind of leadership piece, as a gift to hand back to others, is when you sit down, you sit on a chair and it has four legs. What are the four legs that you have that give you stability? So, mine was my friends, the people that I kind of work with, because they're a really kind of powerful thing. And again, understanding those other, and they kind of change. So go look Deirdre Anderson. She's an amazing woman in Australia. And I recently caught up with her when she was doing the coast to coast walk across England, who unfortunately broke her ankle. So I had a bit of extra time with Dee, which was a gift. So yeah, that's my my kind of take. But yeah, David, we love you, and you are warmly welcome into our world.
A gentleman of her
I'm
spirit.
honored.
It is interesting, right? Like we live in a gendered balanced world, right? In terms of, half population is one or the other. We don't see it across all parts of industry. It is interesting, Mel, that it's important. You've thought strategically. We need to have more voices at the table here to solve for a complex problem.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's about for me. It's that if we're going to solve the problem of the world being inactive, and I say the world, unfortunately, the numbers are stark across both genders here, as well as kids and across all ages. We just need to break it down a bit more, to have more voices, to look at it in a complex way and go, right, what can we provide? And relates to every business, in my opinion, because there's very few that are targeting just one, demographic. And Mel, even though you're targeting really one problem for one demographic, you're automatically listening to multiple demographics and multiple voices there. And that's the key, I think, in so many ways, because to your point, the solution impacts both. Apologies. The solution impacts both. And what's nice about this is that you've had really good mentorship. David, you mentioned mentorship as well. You both mentioned empowerment. If we can empower more people to be physically active, we can empower more people to be, part of the solution and further their voice into what else do we need to create? What else do we need to solve for? Like more trainers, more gyms, more strength training, more access to education, more access to what's good in menopausal fitness training, strength training, what's not. We should be part of the solution. And that's why for me, it's exciting when we look at the growth of the industry of people being physically active, as well as the growth of people being trained to help other people to be physically active. And all of these solutions overlap quite nicely, which is really nice.
And I think we always talk about, and I'm sure you both echo this, that if we were to give one pill to somebody every day that would change their life forever, it would be being active and moving. And we do a lot of work in breast cancer, and the statistics, and I'm sure they're global, that if we were an active nation in the United Kingdom, we would reduce the breast cancer diagnosis by up to 25%. That's fundamentally how important activity is. If you move forward and you look at a person, because obviously it's a male and female, predominantly female breast cancer, is if you are active once you have had breast cancer and strength train, again, the importance of those two activities is you can reduce your chances of getting secondary breast cancer by anything between 30 to 40%. And everyone goes, really? I didn't realize. If you look through a lens of chemotherapy, it's 5%, but we don't administer exercise and strength training to people post breast cancer, which we should. And I think it's something that lifestyle is so vitally important. Male, female, old, young, it's something that we should be taking more of. And how do we, through partnerships of, working together, provide those solutions?
Yeah. David, this is where we connected obviously recently around the chronic diseases and having more training for that. Walk us through what you guys are doing, because you're very well connecting the leadership, the skills, the development, the career, and the healthcare and lifestyle problems. Help us connect those dots.
Absolutely. And before I start into that, though, I think what's an interesting point, and it is, and when I talk about the experience in terms of what I've seen in the evolution, in terms of how a gym is set up and what people are gravitating to, and looking at the two genders and looking at the differences, I think the biggest thing here is that we need to understand, for our business being the fitness industry as well as other business, understand that my experience may be different than yours and maybe different than yours, and understanding what that looks like. Like, we've talked about a host of things that were medically related, safety related, a host of things that from my fitness experience doesn't come into play. And so I think when we look at how we run our businesses and how we create environments that are tied into fitness, it is important to have an understanding of, hey, I want a diverse population that is looking at every decision that we're making and representing different groups, understanding the fact of, hey, I show up to the gym and at 6 a.m. and I do my same workout every single day and I walk back or whatever, but my experience is different than another person's experience, different than another person's experience, what's appealing to them, what they're willing to spend money in, what they feel comfortable in, where they're safe in, all these different things. And that's why I think it is so incredibly important, whether it's male or female or beyond, looking at our industry and going, are we representing our entire population or just the small subset that is running through our head based upon our experience? Oh, With that being said, though, I want to go back into your question as we talk about medical fitness and corrective exercise and how important those are, and understanding that there's a fair population of people that are going from sedentary to doctor's visit to all of a sudden starting into a fitness routine. You see it in the health club sector. You see it from an education perspective with our fitness professionals. How do we train people effectively in terms of where they're coming in, where we're meeting them initially, from assessment to programming to progressions and regressions in their programming to making sure that we're doing things as safely and effectively as possible, and tied into what's going to benefit the person and not necessarily put them at risk. So we do a lot from an education perspective, both from our standard certifications that we're providing, understanding our audience is diverse and that we need data, we need to understand our clients before we do go about building programming, to ultimately our specialization. So as we're talking about, we have women's fitness, we have senior fitness. Our corrective exercise specialization is considered best in class, ultimately, from people that would be prehab, post-hab, all kinds of different things tied into musculoskeletal injuries and beyond. But we are consistently, as an education organization, trying to prepare our professionals to work with every sector, every special population. And a lot of those specializations are tied into what we'll call the medical fitness bucket in working with folks that are dealing with particular situations or coming, post-surgery, post-treatment, et cetera.
And it's at a good time when we're starting to see an awful lot more investment in women's health and a lot more research in women's health. And, I think probably 10, 15 years ago, we would have had the perception that women were small men in so many ways. And that still applies in certain ways. So it's a very interesting time where we're seeing much more nuanced research on women's health and the impact ultimately of our hormonal changes, whether it's before pregnancy, whether it's during pregnancy, whether it's perimenopause or menopause, and all the complexities that we have because of our physiology. And they do lead
Absolutely.
to differences, in that training, and they do lead to differences of chronic diseases. I'm somebody that's starting to get a grip on some of the science right now around endometriosis. It seems to be this unknown, understood condition, but yet vastly prevalent across every part of the world from what I can see. And that's just one example of, a very debilitating condition that we know like minutia about. So it is important that we're looking at healthcare, women's health, and all of that research coming out. And David, it is great to hear that the diversity, the segmentation of these challenges has been really built into everyone's training, or at least those that are starting to go down that route, and more people are focusing into healthcare. And obviously, as you know, I'm passionate about. We have a lot of challenges with healthcare and lifestyle medicine and lifestyle and physical activity, exercise medicine is just powerful. And many talk about that for breast cancer. Like that's phenomenal statistics that if we got
Yes,
people to be more physically active, the impact it has on just breast cancer alone would be absolutely huge.
Yeah, and I
no
think it's
doubt.
it's the same whether or not you look at type 2 diabetes or coronary heart disease. And for somebody and myself that over the last 2 years was really struggling with chronic pain because of my total hip replacement need. It was, something that gave me stability and longevity before I got there. But I think it's picking up on your menopause point of view again. When we went out to that barriers survey, safety, I think that was like a given. You're like, yeah, of course it's going to be number one. But second was research, is women are more quizzical now. So we say women are much more educated. So they're greater in, they want to agitate, they want to understand, to be able to say, right, okay, so from a menstruation point of view, from a postpartum point of view, I remember going down my, I guess, menopause journey that I was probably mid to late 40s for somebody that was always good, if not excellent, at activity, that had no problem whatsoever in terms of retaining muscle. I was really starting to struggle on both of those things, and I had no idea. So we're now talking probably 8 to 10 years ago, and I was like, wow, what's happening? And I then, through obviously understanding kind of better that, but now we put ourselves forward 10 years, and it has a greater understanding. And I think we say, isn't it, it's a bit of a menno washing now, but again, we need to be able to educate. So we have 3 pillars in our comms strategy, and the first is educate. Tell women why. Why should they do what they do? Because actually that gives you greater confidence, and it means that you understand how that also feels. Educate, inspire, show relatedness, show people that look like you. And I was on a call this afternoon, and the 2 organizations that we work with, and say, women in their 40s are almost the forgotten era, because people don't really engage with them in the way. And David, it's great to hear that that's not the case with the work that you do. And then, so educate, inspire, and then guide. Be able to give women solutions that, again, are research driven, that are compelling. And I think one of the things that we know, and community is so powerful. That's the thing that sticks us together, that peer group. And I'm sure, David, when you go to the gym, your 5 to 6 a.m. kind of group, I'm sure that you in essence have a peer group, right? You want to be able to find out what they're doing, and that's so very powerful, that whole peer learning piece.
It's well put. You're reminding me, we talk about all of these elements tied into evidence-based training and programming and how important they are, and then dealing with the special populations. But something else that comes up, and this has been critically important to the certification organizations, education organizations here in the US, but in particular from the National Academy of Sports Medicine, I mean, you have to maintain a current CPR AED certification as a fitness professional. And this is required for recertification. It is critically important. It's so important that we offer it now as a course and licensed with the American Safety and Training Institute. But the reason I bring this up is, and I wouldn't know this if I didn't work in the health club sector and was so actively involved in teaching first aid and CPR. I talked about the population of people that will go from sedentary to doctor's visit to bad doctor's visit to training. And very often we don't see it as much, but you talk to anybody that's working in the health club sector, but being able to perform CPR, utilize an AED, know basic first aid, know the critically important steps that have to go into place immediately if somebody experiences any level of sudden cardiac arrest or goes down, or fainting episodes, or whatever it may be. This is real world training and importance that happens. And working in the health club sector, you start to recognize, and you get the letters from people that say, thank God you called 911 when you did, because if we would have waited any longer, we probably wouldn't have made it. That is a real important deal. And sometimes it happens at 6 in the morning when there's 1 or 2 people on staff there. So I love the discussion when it comes down to medical fitness and the importance behind it with fitness professionals and offerings and different things to that degree. But you also have that safety element. That is a real world, real experience scenario that happens around the world. And having responsible people that treat that education, those certifications with importance, and understand that this could come, and there's a very good likelihood that you may have to start initial practices of basic first aid or CPR or AED, et cetera.
And knowing the difference. David, when the last time I did CPR, and you just reminded me I need to update my cert, so another job on my list. We didn't have the difference between the symptoms that were presented for, a female having a heart attack versus a male having a heart attack, for example. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that's all, well understood now in terms of the symptoms being different, and hence when to call is different.
It is, and things have evolved, and thankfully the training is studied so closely. And from when I was teaching in the mid 90s to where we're at today have changed drastically. And certainly our learning styles in the education business now, that so much can be done in an online environment, and the testing and the comprehension and meeting learning styles or whatever. Really, we're teaching at a much higher level than what we were doing previously. One of the important elements, and you're just bringing back a lot of memories here, but something that will always stand out as a highlight within my career is that I had a 6 a.m. receptionist very early on in my career that had gone through CPR. I had trained her on CPR. The number one element of CPR is send somebody to call 911 and come back to you immediately. And there had been an individual who had fallen off of a treadmill and had somewhat passed out, lost consciousness, had gotten back up. She had been made aware. She knew based on training call 911. Doesn't matter what it is. And we were right next door to a fire station. And the gentleman had gotten up and said, please don't call 911. I am absolutely fine. No worries. She called 911. He had left the gym and had walked out to the parking lot. The paramedics came, found him collapsed in front of his car, once again unconscious. We got a letter a week later from the gentleman's wife who had said, you saved his life by
Yeah.
calling.
Yeah.
If nobody had been called, he would have died in that parking lot at that time. And she knew, he told her, do not call 911. She knew from that training, call 911. I was told, call
Yeah.
911, did it and saved a life. And so I know, this is a little bit of a different direction, but it once again is, goes back to critically important things that are tied into the fitness industry, woven in, whether people outside of the industry know or not, are extremely important when it comes down to health and safety.
Yeah. Yeah. Safety is a big key there. David, before we move back to Mel in relation to the career, you've had a very interesting career with it. We have more and more instructors and trainers and more professionals coming out of every university, thankfully, and getting more and more qualified. And I think we're both very strong believers of continuous learning, or all three of us are continuous learning through our life. What are the lessons that you would, help or point out to those coming out now, looking at the industry, going, I want to be in the health, fitness, sport industry for life? What are the lessons
Excellent
you
question.
would plant for that person so that they would avoid some mistakes that you made, as well as fast track their ability to impact, because we have a huge world to change?
Yes, and we've evolved as a general whole from an education perspective in terms of teaching practical skills. My first certification that was not NASM when I was getting into the industry, I remember going through high intensive training. I learned all the bones and muscles. I learned how to take blood pressure, how to do a Monarch bike test, how to understand all of these different protocols that were never going to be practical in a typical health club environment. I could have worked in a cardiac clinic, but working in a general health club did not have any relevancy at all.
Right.
We've evolved in terms of our education, both from the undergraduate and graduate level of colleges and universities, as well as the certifications. My guidance would be this. When you go through certification, obviously do your research in terms of what you're going to learn, how you're going to learn, how you can get a job. Can you get a job in the environment that you want to get into based upon the certifications and the education that you're going to pursue? That would be one. Find something that's going to challenge you, but teach you those practical skills to be a good professional. But certification is baseline education. So understanding that as a fitness professional working in this industry, there's a reason why there's continuing education and staff development and recertification in the same way of a medical career, for example. And that reason being is that you're going to get baseline education, but it's your responsibility to consistently learn
Right.
progressively over time. One, so you can train with special populations. Maybe it's seniors, maybe it's working with women, maybe it's working with youth, etc. But you gain this knowledge and know-how to be able to assess and program and coach and motivate. That's going to be important. And then progressively learn as newer research comes out and we gain a better understanding of how to get to goals effectively. Not only from the physical perspective, but from a behavior modification perspective. How do you motivate people? How do you coach people? The obesity rates have not gotten better. Even though our education is better, even though we have a health club on every corner, we've got all of the tools and the internet gives us all kinds of different programming, they're not getting better. So what does that teach us? How do we work with people to get to the goals that they seek and do it safely and effectively? And so utilize education in that format and treat it as an ongoing staff development quest to become the best professional possible and to seek those best resources in order to be able to represent your industry, yourself, and your clientele most effectively.
And Mel, we see, 60% of graduates now are women, and we definitely have, well, I think the onus is on us where we feel like we need to be more qualified. We know to apply for a role, we need to be like 90% sure we can do whatever the job is. So we definitely approach that a little bit different. What are you seeing? Because I'm also very conscious that because we have a lot of research around women coming out, we're still categorized as a special population, which is also really interesting. But I can see the logic. We're still figuring out half of our hormones and how does it all work?
Yeah, and it's a conversation that I had this afternoon afternoon. And if you look at, I guess, globally, but I look through a lens of the UK, women make up of 50% of the population. So one of the things is, let's not water down women when it then comes to diversity, socioeconomic. We need to have gender parity in funding. We need to look down that kind of lens. You don't then at many times look down that lens from a male point of view. Picking up on some of your points is, comparison is the thief of joy. And picking up on some of David's points is, everything that we did from day one at Her Spirit is truly understand what behavior change meant. It's very easy to then look at theories, but what does behavior change? So we know that what we're trying to create as a solution through the products that we offer is about intrinsic motivation. It's about how do I feel through that kind of process. I laugh when you say that's that very female trait. If I can only do 95% of the job application, I'm not going to apply, versus a male. And this is very, broad brush. So, it's a man goes, well, I can do 5% of it. Surely I'm going to get the job. I think that when you look down confidence and competence as two behaviors, whether or not it's being active or applying to be on a board or a job, is mentoring, changing the conversation around it's okay to do that, I think is a really powerful thing. And conversations like this, male allies through people like David, are really important to be able to do, because we'll always say, and I think this is indicative of so much that we've spoken about over, our last 45 minutes together, is you are far more capable than you think you are. And if you're instilled with that behavior from a very early age, confidence is a positive thing because it gives you that capability and ability to. Let's inspire the female leaders to be able to do that, or women on a trajectory and a journey from a business point of view. And let's use the enablers, the Davids of this world and the others, to then be able to help us. I don't think I would have got to the point that I did in my career in probably my late 20s without great men that enabled me to have that confidence of self. And I think it's a world that we live in now that there is so much opportunity because there's more knowledge, there's more kind of understanding, but let's be confident in self, and, we can achieve things that, again, you never thought possible. I definitely have, and I've loved that journey of challenge through it.
It is interesting. I read their confidence code book recently, and the metrics in there are pretty telling. And if we're to look at progress, I would love to sit back in 5 years' time, reread all the research, the new research from that, and be like, we've done better. Like, we're not waiting for 95% of the job spec to go, I can apply for it. It's 60% or 50%, or it's much. That's a metric I want to see changing. And like
Sure.
the point, it's that confidence of going, you know what, I can do it, and if I can't, I'll just try it anyway. And likewise, like, adopting that sporting mentality of, I try it. Worst case scenario, I fail, and I learn or I enjoy along the journey, and it's something else I've tried, and it's part of the journey to success. And we have to reframe those. To your point, Mel, we've got to reframe some of that, because it is, we're telling the messages to the younger population, right? So I'm very conscious of how I speak to my nephews and nieces. I'm also a big critic when I hear something said. I'm like, "Nah, can we tailor how we just pitch that one to a little girl versus a little boy?" And there's a few nuances where you have to just challenge. To your point, David, we got to challenge what's our norm so we can better adapt, and we have less safety concerns, but also more confidence throughout, the activity and lifestyle and career. So now you both have spoken to that significantly, which is powerful, and we have a lot of metrics
Sure.
quantify to track
Well,
this.
and you look at the audience, and this is something that I talk about, and you start looking at some of the statistics that are coming out there, and I know it varies by country, but in the US here, we've got a pretty level 50-50 split in terms of health club members between being male and female.
Well, that's good,
And if
David. I
I,
actually didn't realize that, because I was hoping to
yeah,
get stats next week from Poor Global. Good.
yeah, it's quite interesting. And so you start looking at that consumer, and you start evaluating that consumer, and determining who are the people that are buying personal training services, for example? Who are the people that are buying shakes from the pro shop? Who are the people that are investing in extra services? Different things to that degree. And then understanding, looking at that population from the how are we marketing, how are we servicing, how are we doing different things to that degree. I've always felt like I've had a pretty good scope on, okay, this is going to be appealing to the general health club member, or this is how we should market. But it's been funny throughout my career. I will, whether it's a staff uniform, or a, some type of marketing or advertising or commercial that we're running for a particular service, something to that degree. It's always been interesting for me to get a female perspective very often, especially when we are targeting a female consumer, and
Right.
understanding that I may be close, but I'm never 100%. And so getting those opinions on the, I kind of like that, but actually I prefer this. I loved early on in my career, I worked with so many great female marketers. And at Bally, we would run commercials, and I would always be on set for commercials and being the authority when it came down to the exercises that people were doing in the background, very often, making sure that nothing was out of place, that everything was legitimate. And so I would help out on these shoots and working with female marketers and understanding the psychology tied into, I mean, multi-million dollar budgets to try and influence people to come into health clubs back then,
Yeah.
and what was appealing and what would drive behavior and different things to that degree. And it is different from a male and female perspective very often. And so it gave me appreciation for the fact of my thoughts and ideas and what's creative to me and what's appealing to me may not meet 100% from a female perspective than from a male perspective.
We just think differently, and like, yeah, we might live in the same world, but we actually view it very differently. I think that's just something we got to accept and embrace. That's the beauty, I think, of living in a world that is diverse. And
Sure.
it's nice.
And I think that's the importance of 100% gender pool, to be able to acknowledge, understand, challenge, and change. But it's interesting that gender bias point, it still exists. So, I was at the gym today. There's this woman, and she's got twins. And I said, oh, are they both boys? One boy, one girl. She said, so the girl gets offered ballet. The boy gets offered football in American, kind of soccer. And I'm like, wow, does it really still go on? We're living in a decade that, and so the girl goes, I don't want to do ballet. I want to do football. But the school will give me a fine if I don't do ballet. And the mum, and good on her, says, great, I'll pay the fine. I'll pay the fine that my daughter, but we live, we're talking about people's careers in probably their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. But if the 12-year-old girl is still being allocated ballet at school, how does that change her confidence? How does that change her? She's got to have a strong person around her to say, do you know what? It's okay. You don't have to play ballet. You can go and play, football, soccer, and you can choose what you want to do. I think that's still a challenge, isn't it, in the world that we live in?
And the interesting part
It
there,
is.
like the UK's, the England soccer team have been doing phenomenal work, winning the Euros and everything. So there is now a bigger supply than ever for her to see heroes that she's able to copy and follow. So yeah, definitely needs to be changing.
It's and what you bring up, and of course, this is a very international podcast when we talk about where we're broadcasting from currently and where we do the bulk of our business. But somebody, and I brought up Jennifer Halsell DeWitt, and I love picking her brain. We all know her, but I've known Jennifer for quite some time within this industry, and she started in the United States and gained a great appreciation and expertise in the U.S. market, and then worked in Canada, and that's where Jennifer and I first got to know one another, and understanding the differences from a Canadian perspective, from a U.S. perspective, was very interesting. And when I was with Bally, we owned clubs in throughout Canada and through the US, and understanding some differences there. Some of them were gender related, some of them were just general. What was interesting with Jennifer then is then going over to Europe, and I swear nobody else could ever pull this off, where very quickly went from an authority in the US to an authority in Canada to very quickly an authority from a European perspective on the fitness industry, health club industry, personal training. Just absolutely brilliant. But what's been interesting is as we talk about these things, is understanding some of the differences. So Jennifer and I have talked about some of these things that exist in these environments, and I'm thinking about it from a US perspective, but hearing about it that from a European perspective, even from different countries within Europe, differs from the US. And of course, Canada differs from the US. And so having an open mind on this in that, hey, what's consistent here may not be consistent here, and what needs and wants are here may be quite different from where they are here. And so I think that's just important as a leader, whether it's gender-based or demographic-based or anything beyond it, to have an open mind and to talk to different people and get an appreciation of what that experience looks like.
Yeah, the more perceptions and perspectives we can bring to the table, the better chance you have of having a solution that's
So,
fit for so many more.
Mm.
We could talk about this all day, and I know we can't solve the problem today, but you guys are doing a phenomenal job towards it. One last question for you both is around who are the emerging and the established leaders that I may not know that I should be talking to, who are going to be the icons of an era and to follow? Who are they for you, Mel? Give us one or two that you're like, you got to be talking and looking at this. These people, they're doing amazing work.
Oh yeah, I mean, kind of leaders that, I struggle to then be able to see people that I've currently been kind of exposed to. I think my reference point are, I guess people that have got me to where I am, and I've quoted a lot of those. But David, I value your thoughts on who you think that are kind of female leaders that you think are aspirational and inspirational.
Absolutely. Well, I brought up one. I've referenced her a couple of different times, and Jennifer
Jennifer. Yeah.
Helsel-DeWitt, best in class. So incredibly knowledgeable, expertise at every level of the fitness industry through, multiple countries and continents, et cetera, et cetera. So I just think I think she is at a level in our industry that I see very few people at. I also brought up Jody Wellman because her background. If you don't know about 4,000 Mondays and the book that she just came out with, that's been on bestseller lists and all kinds of different bucket lists for reading, all kinds of celebrities and TED Talks, et cetera. It's called You Only Die Once, I believe. Fascinating. Comes with a fitness background, really evolved beyond fitness, just sharp and creative and unbelievable business acumen and just research and study. And she's got a wealth of information, and she is definitely somebody that you want to check out that has really nothing to do, well, I shouldn't say nothing to do, but specifically do with fitness. Um, from an overall operator perspective, the a group that continues year after year to be innovative and creative and sharp from a business perspective is Hyperice. And Hyperice has always done a phenomenal job. Jim Huther and Joe Cannon and Star Sage and a whole host of others there, but they've always been great in terms of employing female leaders and having people front and center. They've been on the forefront of so much from a technology perspective that continues to exceed expectations and grow exponentially. There are a number of different groups within our fitness space that do things really well. Hyperice does them well, and they've got a number of great female leaders that I've worked with over time. Star Sage is as good as they get in that space, and of course Joe and Jim that I brought up before. But that top of mind, that's who I would cite.
Yeah, and now that I've kind of taken the time to think about that, and I would look up at this amazing woman. So her name is Dr. Nigat Arif, and that's Arif. And Nigat is one of the female leaders in this country. So she's a Pakistani woman in a kind of early 40s that has risen to fame because she has decided to smash through a few brick walls and start to have conversations that a lot of women haven't. She's got an amazing book called The Knowledge. Look her up on TikTok and others, and she's been an advisor to us. And I think that her look through a lens as a Pakistani woman that has been really inspirational. So I'm putting Nigat into to that one. So
Love
she's
it.
a brilliant woman.
We've got some
Excellent.
recommendations there as well, which is great. Another one.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up another one, and I'd be remiss at not mentioning Kathleen Ferguson and what she's built at Coach 360. Very, very new in terms of the model that she's created, but identified a need in the industry,
Yeah.
and really recognized the fact that the only way of really fulfilling that need was to go out and create her own business and build it exponentially. And the growth of her business has been, it's been inspiring, and far exceeded expectations, but also providing a voice to the independent coach. It's something that I hadn't identified early on as being a need, but seeing what it's done and being able to highlight the wonderful people, whether they're independent or working in clubs or doing things that are different in communities along those lines, really giving them a voice, providing direction and guidance and insight. It has been it's really been interesting to see that business grow, and I give her a lot of kudos because there's not a lot of people that would have said, "Hey, I'm going to stick my neck out and I'm going to build this because I've been in this industry for a long period of time. It's not being done effectively, and the only way of getting this done in the way that I feel like it needs to be done is by doing it on my own."
Hmm.
Well, thank you guys for sharing some of those names. I think it's really important that we continue to highlight who is doing great work in this space in particular and amplifying the names and the people and the purpose and the why. Because the rising tide raises all boats in so many ways, and we have a great challenge of inactivity across the world and health and challenges around that. So we have a lot of work to do, and I appreciate both of you and your time and what you've been doing over your career as well as in the last hour sharing so much of yourselves. Thank you so much. Mel, I look forward to getting to know her spirit more. And David, you're now an honorary gentleman, so we're going to have to get out with Mel in the UK when you're over this direction. And likewise, David, I look forward to seeing you again on the US side of things because there's so much great work, and I appreciate that you're expanding globally as well. And I look forward to supporting that where I can. It is a pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both.
Really enjoyed the conversation. And David, it would be lovely to keep connected because I think that sharing of knowledge and expertise, I think, could be a really kind of powerful one. So yeah, it's lovely to meet you, and thanks for the opportunity, Grace.
You're absolutely welcome. If we all
Thank
work
you, Mel.
together, we'll get there stronger.
Well put.
Thank you for listening. You can connect the dots with others by sharing this podcast with colleagues and teammates. At wearethecollective.world, you can join a professional network, avail of professional development, and engage your support team. We collaborate on the shared pursuit for gender balance in health and business. Until next time, keep connecting the dots.